Main Street has its own flavor in many different varieties.
Disney is typically associated with childhood joy. As kids, it filled our hearts and our imaginations with its many classic animations. We were always told that Disneyland is where dreams come true. So it may come as a surprise that many bizarre incidents have occurred at the Disney theme parks. Some even took to the worse, causing death to either a guest or an employee. Here is our list compiling some of the most horrific ways people have died at the many Disney theme parks.
Another new world has been opened up. Walt Disney World.
A family and their two sons decided to have a nice family day out, and where else is better than a Disney theme park? The family went on a ride called Rock and Roller Coaster, and at the time of the incident back in June 2006, the Disney website described the ride as such: zoom from 0 to 60 miles per hour with the force of a supersonic F-14, take in high-speed loops and turns synchronized to a specially recorded Aerosmith soundtrack, and zip through Tinseltown in the highest, loudest limo you've ever seen. With that description, it sure seems like a fun time, right? However, after the family stepped off the ride, 12-year-old Michael Russell collapsed. The family was immediately horrified, and the father sprang into action, performing CPR on the poor boy. The father desperately tried fighting for his son's life, even having the help of a Disney employee, but it was to no avail. It was later determined that the boy suffered a heart attack from the fast-moving ride. Rock and Roller Coaster was shut down for some time during the investigation. Disney did offer the family their most sincerest and deepest sympathies. Though this death was shocking, it was not at all uncommon. 5 months before the death of Michael Russell, a 4-year-old boy died of a heart attack after going on the same ride.
Those who make it past this ghost-infested stretch of the river find a relatively safe landing at a village right out of the old Western Territory.
On February 11th, 2004, Javert Cruz, a father of 2 and Disney employee, was tragically killed. Javert worked as a costume character for the park and was dressed up as the beloved Disney character Pluto the day he was killed. It was a Wednesday, during the Share a Dream Come True parade, when Cruz met his untimely death. Supposedly, Cruz was in front of a moving float as it was about to pass through a gate. But then Javert tripped and didn't have time to get back to his feet or out of the way. Horrifically, he was completely run over. Unfortunately, some guests, children included, witnessed the gruesome sight. Cruz was nearly run over a second time before the next float stopped and people began to rush to his aid. The rest of the crew and audience were evacuated from the area. Javert's sister described him as a Disney character even when he wasn't working. I used to call him a wingless angel. The matter soon became a police investigation, but was ultimately ruled a complete accident. His sister had this to say regarding his death: "We believe it could have been prevented. I believe they should have kept a distance between him as a character and the float. It's an accident, but it's not acceptable. They should have prevented this." His family was at such a loss after his death that his 65-year-old mother had to be rushed to the hospital due to blood pressure issues. Disney was only fined $6,300 for his death by OSHA.
In the Magic Kingdom, anything is possible.
Alan Ferris was a 37-year-old man who caused complete terror at a Disney park, ultimately taking his own life. Prior to Alan's death, he was in a long-term relationship that ended due to his girlfriend filing a domestic violence injunction against him. Shortly after the breakup, Ferris tried killing himself on July 31st by slitting his wrists. He was unsuccessful in his first suicide attempt, and after some time at his local hospital, Alan was back on the streets. This time, he had a sinister plan to get back at his ex-girlfriend. His friends and family grew more and more alarmed after not seeing him for a few days. Once again, they were fearing for his life. Alan waited until the park closed on Saturday night before breaking into his attack. A security guard saw Alan walking around and assumed the man was lost. He tried ushering him out of the park, but that's when things took a turn for the worst. Ferris unleashed his 12-gauge shotgun and fired 3 times at the guard. 2 other guards had appeared and Alan shot them as well. Luckily, Alan somehow managed to miss every single shot, so none of the employees were injured. He fired 3 times at the first guard, then fired off a round at the other 2. I don't know how he missed them, said Deputy Solomon. At one point, Ferris was distracted, giving the first guard the opportunity to radio in the police. Alan proceeded to hold all the guards at gunpoint in the men's restroom. During this, he kept asking where his ex-girlfriend was, demanding to see her at once, knowing that she worked at the park. Thankfully, she was not at work, and after some time, Alan walked out of the bathroom, simply leaving the men behind. The police soon surrounded the area and ordered Ferris to drop his weapon. He repeatedly replied that he wanted them to shoot him. He kept shouting, shoot me, you're going to have to kill me," said Deputy Solomon. Alan then raised his gun to the side of his head and fired. Police quickly rushed to his body, expecting him to be dead. But he wasn't. Somehow, Ferris was still clutching to life and began to reach for the gun once again, but officers quickly apprehended the gun before he could get it again. Alan let out a few unintelligible words before blacking out. They flew him in a helicopter to a nearby hospital, where he died shortly after arriving at the medical center.
Walt Disney once said, "You can dream, design, and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it requires people to make that dream a reality."
Disney World is supposed to be one of the greatest places to visit for all ages, the happiest place on Earth. So, it's shocking to know that 2 guests died at the same park within only months of each other. Another peculiar factor is that both deaths took place on rides that are considered slow-moving. The first to pass was a 54-year-old woman on the ride Toy Story Mania. The ride is described as blasting moving targets in this Midway-styled 4D shooting game starting your favorite Toy Story characters on the Disney website. Shortly after the woman got off of Toy Story Mania, she began to feel dizzy, suddenly collapsing. She was brought to the hospital where she was determined dead on arrival. Not too long after, another woman, this time a much younger 22-year-old, died on a similar kid-friendly ride. She died on the famous It's a Small World boat ride that so many of us are already familiar with. It's a classic Disney ride, and to think that someone could suffer a heart attack from it is truly chilling. Though, the ride has been before associated with childhood nightmares from its almost eerie theme song. Many creepypastas have been based upon this ride. Even Muji, whose music is displayed in many creepypasta videos on YouTube, has his own rendition of the song. It was later discovered that the woman died from a pre-existing heart condition that was somehow triggered from the ride. An Orlando theme park consolation had this to say regarding the woman's sudden death. "In a small world, I wouldn't think that would cause you to have a spike in blood pressure or anything like that. The worst part is to think that the last thing she ever saw were the faces of the Small World dolls, and the last thing she ever heard was that It's a Small World After All tune, before finally fading away."
Most enchanting of all is Cinderella's castle, the central landmark of Fantasyland, and in fact, the symbol of Walt Disney World.
Water is a theme that all Disney parks share, from their world-famous boat rides to the more common log rides such as Splash Mountain. Something you probably don't think of when on those rides is, has anyone ever died in these waters? Though the answer to that question is yes. More people than Disney would like to admit have died water-related deaths at the park. One such death took place on August 11th, 1977, when a 4-year-old boy's body was found dead, floating in the moat of Cinderella's castle. The boy wandered off from his mother when they were eating ice cream at one of the many Disney shops. The family and staff frantically searched the park for the boy, fearing the worst. After hours of their pursuit, they were finally met with a hair-raising sight. Supposedly, after the boy wandered off, he made his way to the castle and somehow got over the guard gate that was there to protect guests from falling into the water. After he was over that, the boy then tripped and fell into the water. Being unable to swim and nobody in the area to help him, the boy drowned. The grief-stricken mother sued Disney for their guard gates not being tall enough, claiming that any small child could easily become another victim. However, the judge disagreed and sided with Disney, instead berating the mother in court for not keeping a closer eye on her child. She eventually got another judge to side with her and was rewarded some amount of money. Another drowning took place just 10 years later in 1987, this time in the Fort Wilderness Pool. Miguel Diaz was only 6 years old when he was found dead inside the pool. He had been there with his elderly grandfather for the day. The two were having a great fun family time, but then the grandfather felt worn out. He said he would take a break from swimming, but promised to still keep an eye on the boy as the child continued to swim. After some time, the grandfather decided to go get a snack, thinking nothing could possibly happen in the short amount of time it would take for him to get one. By the time he returned, the child was already dead. There was a lifeguard on site, but he failed to notice the boy drowning in the crowded pool. The family sued Disney and got a settlement of $250,000. Splash Mountain is one of the most famous Disney attractions, and is also one to be linked with a few deaths. In one such case, a man in November 2000 attempted to climb out of the ride midway through it. Other passengers claimed he was trying to get to the emergency exit, being too afraid of the ride, but then was struck by one boat and then run over by another. The police determined there was no fault on Disney, that it was completely on the passenger. It just goes to show, even the happiest place on earth can have its gruesome little secrets.